I thought the worst part of that night would be a hangover, until my wife walked into the bachelor party dressed like a stranger, and everything I believed about our marriage collapsed in seconds. I thought I was heading out for a relaxing night with a couple of my old buddies, but instead I stumbled right into a reality I never imagined. My name's Ryan, and for the past 7 years I've been married to my wife, Emily. We first crossed paths back in college, fell hard and fast, and tied the knot not long after we graduated. I truly believed what we had was rare, strong, genuine. Everything seemed to click. She's sharp, stunning, and has this kind of effortless charisma that draws people in. There was this spark in her, bold, fearless, and magnetic. I admired that about her. She never held back what was on her mind, even if it cut a little deep sometimes. But lately, something hasn't felt right. I don't even know how to explain it clearly. It all started so subtly, like tiny shifts that seemed harmless at first. Things like her suddenly putting a lock on her phone when before she used to leave it out in the open, no big deal. Or how she'd snap at me, get kind of cold, whenever I asked where she was going or who she was with. "You're imagining things, Ryan," she'd sigh, brushing me off like I was the one being unreasonable. I really tried to take her word for it. I wanted to. But when that uneasy feeling starts to settle deep in your stomach, it's hard to ignore. It's not like I didn't make an effort. I suggested going out together more, surprised her with little gestures, her favorite snacks, a handwritten note, just anything to get us smiling again. But no matter what I did, it felt like I was invisible. She'd come home late more often, saying she was with friends or caught up at work. I kept trying to rationalize it. I told myself she was just overwhelmed, that the stress would pass. But emotionally, she was slipping further away from me. Like she was physically there but emotionally checked out. It got to the point where I felt like I was sharing a home with someone I no longer knew. Now, thinking back, maybe the signs were there and I just didn't want to face them. When you love someone, it's easier to come up with explanations than it is to accept that something might be broken. You convince yourself it's all in your head, even when your instincts are screaming otherwise. And then, a couple of months ago, something happened that I couldn't shake. Things between Emily and me were strained, but I was still holding on, telling myself that this was just a phase, and that if I gave her some space, maybe we'd find our way back to each other. But then it started getting strange. It was a Friday evening and we were both finally home after a tough week. I was hoping we could just unwind, watch a movie, maybe share some popcorn like we used to. She was curled up on the couch, phone in hand, barely saying a word. I didn't want to overthink it, but then her phone buzzed and I noticed her whole energy shift. She glanced at the screen and for just a second I saw a smile. Small, but it was there. The kind of smile people make when they hear from someone they're genuinely excited to talk to. Without a word, she stood up, slipped her phone into her pocket and walked toward the bedroom. "I'm heading out," she said like it was just another errand. I tried to sound calm, casual. "Heading out? Where to?" She didn't even glance up. "Just grabbing a drink with a friend," she muttered, already flipping through hangers in the closet, pulling out something a little dressier than what she'd been wearing around the house. "I won't be long." I wanted to take her word for it. But something about it, it just didn't sit right. This wasn't new. Lately, whenever her phone buzzed, she'd suddenly have plans, out of nowhere. A drink here, a quick errand there. And any time I asked, she'd act like I was making a mountain out of nothing. I didn't want to fight. I was trying to hold it together. So I just nodded. "All right, enjoy." She didn't say anything. Just grabbed her bag, slid on her heels and walked out the door. I stood there in silence, staring at the space where she'd been, feeling this heavy pit form in my chest. It felt like she was in a hurry to leave me behind. And this pattern, it kept repeating itself. Every couple of weeks, same story. We'd barely talk, her phone would buzz, and minutes later she'd be gone. I kept trying to chalk it up to my own insecurity, but inside, I knew I wasn't imagining it. The last time it happened, I couldn't bottle it up anymore. As she reached for the doorknob, I finally asked, "Why do you keep rushing out like this? Who is it you're really meeting?" She paused. For a second I thought she might give me the truth. But then she turned with that same dismissive look I'd grown used to. "I'm just going out, Ryan. Why do you always have to turn it into something?" "Because you're not acting like yourself, Emily. I'm your husband. I think I deserve to know what's going on." She let out a long sigh, the kind that says she was already done with the conversation before it even started. Then she shook her head slightly. "I don't have time for this," she muttered, and with that she walked out the door. I just stood there frozen. I don't know what cut deeper, realizing she was lying to my face or that she didn't even care enough to make it believable anymore. It felt like she was slipping away and no matter how hard I tried I couldn't hold on. A week passed and the tension between us was thick enough to choke on. That last night kept playing over in my head, but neither of us brought it up. It was like we were two strangers sharing a space, just going through the motions, avoiding eye contact, avoiding each other. I was barely functioning, and part of me thinks she could sense it, but she never said a word. It felt like she was waiting for me to say something, like she knew I didn't have the strength to confront her head on. Then, on Friday, my buddy Chris gave me a call out of the blue. "Yo man, what are you up to tonight?" he asked. I hadn't talked to him in a few weeks, and honestly, hearing his voice was a relief I didn't expect. "Come grab a drink. I've got something to tell you." I looked over at Emily. She was in the kitchen, leaned against the counter, scrolling on her phone like always, her face barely reacting to the world around her. I thought maybe I should stay, try once more to bridge the gap between us. But deep down I already knew how that would go. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound a little more upbeat than I felt. "A drink sounds good." We met at this local bar downtown, one of those places we used to hit up back when we didn't have so many worries. It had this easygoing vibe, and for the first time in weeks I felt like I could breathe a little. Chris was already there, 2 cold beers waiting on the table. As soon as he spotted me, he stood up with a grin and pulled me into one of those backslapping hugs. "Ryan, took you long enough," he laughed. "Man, you look like you needed this more than I thought." "You have no idea," I replied, cracking a smile for the first time in what felt like forever. I slid into the seat across from him. "So what's this big news?" He raised his bottle with a grin stretching across his face. "I'm getting married." I nearly choked on my first sip. "Wait, what? Are you serious? That's huge, man. When did this happen?" Chris nodded, eyes lit up like a kid at Christmas. "Last weekend. I asked Lauren and she said yes. We're thinking about a spring wedding. But before that, we're throwing a proper bachelor party next weekend, and you, my friend, are on the guest list." I laughed, shaking my head. "A bachelor party? Sounds like trouble. Count me in." For a little while, I forgot about everything going on back home. It was good to just be in the moment, laughing and talking about something other than tension and heartache. Chris talked about how nervous he was when he popped the question, even though he was pretty sure she'd say yes. It was obvious how much he loved her. That kind of certainty. I envied it more than I wanted to admit. As he went on, this strange mix of emotions stirred inside me. I was happy for him, really I was, but part of me ached. He was stepping into this bright new chapter of his life, full of hope and love, while mine felt like it was crumbling quietly in the background. "So next weekend," he said, leaning forward with a grin, "we're doing it right, drinks, games, the whole 9 yards. You in?" I hesitated for just a second. A small voice in my head whispered that maybe I shouldn't go, not with things falling apart at home. But then I remembered, it wasn't like Emily was going to notice I was gone. "Yeah," I said, lifting my bottle to his. "I'll be there." "Good," Chris said, clinking his bottle against mine. "Wouldn't be the same without you." We spent the rest of the evening reminiscing and cracking up like we used to, back before everything got so heavy. For a few hours, it was almost like I had my old life back. But walking back to my car later, that familiar weight crept back onto my shoulders. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of excuse Emily would come up with next weekend, and whether I'd even bother to ask. When I finally got home, I felt lighter, like for once, something had chipped away at the heaviness sitting in my chest. I walked through the front door expecting to see Emily in her usual spot on the couch, but the room was empty. I found her in the kitchen, her phone tossed beside her, a half-full glass of wine in hand. "Hey," I said, placing my keys on the table. "I'm back." She looked up, offered a small, polite smile. "You're home late. Everything all right?" "Yeah, actually," I replied, surprised at the calm in my voice. "Chris is getting married." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Really? That's nice, I guess." She took another sip of wine and glanced back at her phone, already drifting away from the conversation. "He's throwing a bachelor party next weekend," I added. "Invited me to come out. So, I'm going." Her expression shifted the moment the words came out of my mouth. She set her wine glass down and crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing just slightly, but enough that I noticed. "A bachelor party?" she repeated, her voice laced with something I couldn't quite place. Maybe suspicion, maybe irritation. "So what's the plan? You guys gonna drink yourselves silly and spend the night with a bunch of women who know how to get attention?" I blinked, caught off guard by the way she said it. "No, nothing like that," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "It's just a small group of us. Chris isn't the wild type and neither am I." She gave me a look, half disbelief, half sarcasm. "Sure. Because bachelor parties are always wholesome, right?" I felt frustration bubbling up in my chest. "Come on, Em. It's just some old friends catching up and celebrating Chris getting engaged. I'm not out looking for trouble. She picked her glass back up but didn't take a sip. Her grip on it tightened as her eyes locked on the counter. Whatever, she muttered coldly. Go if you want. Not like you care what I think anyway. Her sudden shift in mood threw me. Emily was never the jealous type. If anything, she always rolled her eyes at couples who couldn't give each other space. But now she was acting like I just told her I was heading out on some shady adventure. Why are you making this a big deal? I asked, trying to keep things from escalating. It's one evening. I'm not doing anything wrong. She looked up at me then and I caught a flicker in her eyes, something sharp, maybe hurt or angry or just tired. You know what, Ryan? She said with a bitter smile. Do whatever you want. That's what you've always done anyway. And just like that, she turned and walked out of the room, her footsteps fading as she climbed the stairs. A few seconds later, I heard the soft click of our bedroom door closing behind her. I stood there in silence, the chill from the kitchen creeping into my chest. She didn't seem to care when she was the one heading out without warning, but the second I had plans, suddenly I was the bad guy? None of it made sense. I stared at the spot where she'd been, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Maybe it was jealousy, but it felt deeper than that. Like fear. Or guilt. Something about her reaction wasn't just defensive. It was almost panicked. Fine, I muttered to myself. I'm going. That night, as I climbed into bed beside her sleeping figure, I couldn't shake the feeling that her outburst wasn't about the party at all. It felt like she was afraid of what I still didn't know. When the weekend finally rolled around, I could tell I needed this night more than I'd admitted to anyone. Emily and I had barely spoken all week. Any conversation we had was surface level, like two co-workers making small talk in the break room. The air between us was heavy, uncomfortable. I didn't mention the party again and neither did she. It was like she wanted to pretend it wasn't happening, and I was more than happy not to stir the pot. I arrived at the bar where the guys had all agreed to meet, and as soon as I walked in I could feel the energy. Laughter, music, familiar voices. It felt like stepping into another life. Chris spotted me first, and within seconds I was wrapped in a bear hug and handed a beer. Ryan. Man, you made it, he said, his smile wide. I was starting to think you bailed. Not a chance, I laughed. Been looking forward to this all week. The night started off easy. A few drinks, catching up, joking around like we were back in college. I hadn't realized how much I needed it, to just exist in a space where I wasn't second-guessing every word, every silence. As the evening rolled on, we moved into a private room Chris had reserved. Poker chips hit the table and soon we were all circled around, drinks in hand, tossing out bets and laughing at every win and loss like it actually mattered. I even started winning, which was rare for me, and the guys didn't let me forget it. We should make this a monthly thing, someone joked. This feels like the old days. Chris raised his beer with a grin. To old friends and new beginnings. We clinked glasses and for a few fleeting moments, everything felt okay. I forgot about the silence back home, forgot about Emily's strange behavior, forgot how her eyes had changed that night in the kitchen. All that mattered was the laughter and the warmth of good company. But even as I laughed and played, there was this quiet echo in the back of my mind, a reminder that none of this was permanent. That once I stepped out of this bar and drove back to that quiet house, I'd have to face whatever was really going on. And the truth was, I still didn't know what that was. So I pushed the thought away. I let myself have the night. I drank, I joked, I threw chips into the pot like it mattered. I wanted to believe just for a little while that everything was still okay. But I had no idea that what came next would shatter that illusion completely. It was already past midnight and the bachelor party had reached that point where everything started to blur. The drinks were flowing, everyone was laughing a little too loud, and the room had that chaotic, buzz kind of energy you only get after a long night with old friends. I was still at the poker table, grinning as I pulled in a modest pot, soaking in the moment, when the door to our private room suddenly swung open. At first, I didn't even look up. I figured it was just another round of drinks arriving, or maybe someone who'd shown up late. But then someone yelled, "Surprise!" and a few of the guys burst into cheers, clearly in on something I wasn't. I glanced up from my cards, casually, not thinking anything of it, and then I saw them. A group of women had stepped into the room, confident, stylish, dressed to get attention. They walked in like they owned the place and suddenly the energy in the room shifted. It was like someone had lit a match. Everything became sharper, louder, more electric. For a split second I thought there'd been some kind of mix-up. Maybe they had the wrong room. But then I saw Chris's friend, the one who'd organized most of the night, step forward with this huge grin. Thought I'd spice things up, he said proudly. Can't send the groom off without a little fun, right? The guys erupted, clapping, whistling, shouting stuff like, best idea ever. And now it's a party. But I didn't laugh. I couldn't. Because as the women started to mingle and the crowd pulled them in, my eyes locked onto one of them, standing near the back. And my heart stopped. It was Emily. She was just there. Dressed in a way I had never seen her dress before. Frozen like a deer in headlights. Her eyes found mine in an instant, and I saw the shock hit her face, sharp and unmistakable. For a moment, the entire room seemed to vanish. The music, the voices, the laughter, it all faded into this awful ringing silence. She looked like she couldn't breathe, and so did I. One of the guys who didn't recognize her gave me a playful nudge, completely oblivious to what was happening. Dude, you okay? You look like you've just seen a ghost. He had no idea. But a few others did. A couple of my friends, guys who'd been to our wedding who knew Emily well, caught sight of her too. I saw it register in their eyes. First confusion, then recognition, then horror. Their faces shifted from celebration to stunned silence, and suddenly the whole party felt wrong. I sat there, completely still, gripping the edge of the poker table like it was the only thing holding me up. It was surreal. Like I wasn't in my body anymore. Emily here? At this party? Standing among the women who had clearly been hired or invited to entertain. She looked like she wanted to vanish. Her gaze flicked around the room, probably calculating how to get out without causing a scene. But it was too late for that. Everyone who mattered had seen her. And there was no covering it up now. I could feel my heart thundering in my chest, my mind racing. All the strange behavior, the secrecy, the locked phone, the cold distance, all of it came crashing together in one awful moment of truth. What was she doing here? Why here of all places? I didn't even hear what was said next, but one of the guys who didn't know her shouted over the music, "Come on! Let's get this party going." The room laughed again, but it was distant now, like an echo through a tunnel. None of it felt real anymore. Emily opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Her face was pale, her expression caught between panic and shame. I don't know how long we stared at each other across the room. Might have been seconds, maybe longer. But in that moment, everything I'd been trying to hold on to, every excuse, every bit of hope that we could still fix things, collapsed. Somehow I managed to stand. My legs were trembling, my hands were numb, but I rose from the table. I didn't look at anyone. Didn't say a word. I just walked forward, eyes locked on her. Emily didn't move. She stood there like she was bracing for impact, like if she just stayed still long enough, it might all go away. But we both knew, nothing would ever be the same after this. I reached for her hand, not roughly but firm enough to make it clear we were leaving. She flinched the moment our skin touched, her eyes going wide, filled with a mix of guilt and panic. "Ryan, wait," she started, her voice trembling. But I wasn't about to let her finish whatever excuse was about to come out of her mouth. "Let's go," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, tight with emotion. I didn't want to cause a scene, not there, not with all those eyes on us and my heart pounding like a war drum. I just needed to get out. We both did. I led her out of the room, not saying a word, barely aware of the stunned silence we left in our wake. I could feel the stares, hear the hushed murmurs ripple behind us. But I didn't look back. I spotted her coat on the wall near the door, grabbed it, and threw it around her shoulders. She didn't resist. She just let me guide her outside, down the stairs, and out onto the cold, quiet street where I flagged down the first taxi I could find. The ride back to our house felt endless. Neither of us spoke. She stared out the window, her reflection flickering in the glass, hands clenched together in her lap like she was holding herself in place. I watched her for a moment, waiting to feel something other than fury, but it never came. I was too hurt, too stunned. When we pulled into the driveway, I paid the driver without a word. Emily followed me up the steps, slow and silent. As soon as we walked through the front door and I shut it behind us, everything that had been boiling inside of me came crashing out. "What were you thinking, Emily?" I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. "How could you do something like this? Are you working as an escort?" She flinched like the words themselves had hit her. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. She stood there, pale and still, lips pressed tightly together. "I can explain," she began. "I don't want an explanation." I snapped, my voice cracking with disbelief. "I want to know why. Why would you do this? Was it for money? Is that really what this is about?" I started pacing, hands clenched into fists, not even realizing how hard I was breathing. "We're not broke, Emily. We're doing fine. We both have jobs, we have savings. So What was the point of all this? She didn't answer right away. I saw her debating whether to lie, to deflect. But instead she sighed, deep and defeated, and finally met my eyes. I thought it would be easy money, she said quietly. Just something short-term. Nothing serious. I stared at her in disbelief. Easy? I repeated. You think this is easy? Sneaking around, lying to me, humiliating me in front of my friends? Was that easy too? No, she said quickly. That's not what I meant. I didn't think it would go this far. You didn't think? I said, my voice rising again. There are 100 other ways to earn extra cash if that's really what you wanted. You didn't need to do that. She looked down, biting her lip, and I could see her whole body trembling. I didn't do it because we needed the money, she admitted. I did it because it was fast. No interviews, no applications. It was just there. My chest tightened. I felt sick. So what, our marriage just wasn't exciting enough for you? You needed some side thrill to keep things interesting? No. Ryan, no, she said, stepping toward me. It wasn't about you. It wasn't about us. I don't even know what it was about. I made a mistake. A huge one. I stepped back from her, shaking my head. You didn't make a mistake, Emily. You made a series of decisions. Over and over again. You chose this. You chose to lie to me. To betray everything we built together. She was crying now, quietly, but I couldn't find it in me to comfort her. Not this time. I saw you tonight, I said, my voice breaking. I saw the look on your face when you walked in. You weren't shocked to be there. You were shocked to see me. You were living this double life and hoping it would never catch up with you. I was going to stop, she whispered. I swear I was. I didn't know how. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to calm the storm inside me, but it wasn't working. You could have told me. You could have come to me before any of this. You could have trusted me. But instead you let it fester. And now look where we are. The silence that followed was deafening. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself, crying softly. And me. I was completely hollowed out. I felt like someone had torn the foundation out from under my life, and now I was standing in the wreckage trying to recognize the woman I thought I knew. I trusted you, I said quietly, the words trembling. And now I don't even know who you are. She opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. She just stood there, still and small, as the reality of what she'd done settled between us. Whatever we had before that night, it was gone. And I didn't know if anything could bring it back. The days after that night all melted into one long, painful blur. I can't even remember climbing into bed, or if Emily and I exchanged another word after the argument. I just remember the silence, thick, suffocating, and the way I couldn't bring myself to look at her. Whatever we had, it was broken beyond repair. There wasn't a single word she could say to make any of it right. So the next morning I didn't wait. I went straight to the courthouse and filed for divorce. It felt brutal, like ripping open a wound that had been festering for weeks. But it also felt necessary. There was no sense pretending anymore, pretending our marriage was still real, or that the woman I thought I loved hadn't turned into someone I didn't recognize. As much as it tore at me, I had to let it go. I had to let her go. The news traveled fast, at least among the people who mattered. Mike, Chris, and Dave, guys who had seen it all unfold at the party, each reached out within a day or two. They didn't press me for details. They didn't have to. They'd seen enough that night to know something had detonated. And like true friends, they stepped in with the kind of support I didn't even know I needed. They invited me out for a drink, just something low-key to get me out of the house. I agreed, mostly because I couldn't stand being in that house with Emily any longer than I had to. I needed air, space from the mess, from the silence, from everything that reminded me of how far things had fallen. We met up at a quiet little place on the edge of town, the kind of bar where nobody stares and nobody asks questions. Mike was already there when I arrived, leaning over a half-finished beer. He stood when he saw me, pulling me into a hug and patting my back like a brother. "Ryan," he said. "You holding up okay?" I gave a tired shrug. "Trying." Chris and Dave showed up not long after, and before I knew it, I had a drink in my hand, and for the first time in days I didn't feel like I was drowning. We talked for a while, keeping things light, steering clear of anything too heavy. I appreciated it more than I could say. But deep down I knew the topic was coming. Eventually, Dave broke the silence, his voice low and steady. "Look man, we were there. We saw it. Her walking in like that. Seeing your face? It was rough. No one should have to go through that." I nodded, my throat tightening. Even if I didn't want to talk about it, I couldn't deny it was burned into my memory. Her face, the moment our eyes met, that split second where everything I feared became real. Chris leaned forward. Whatever you need, we've got you, all right? You want to take her down in this divorce? We'll help. You shouldn't have to fight this alone. Yeah, Mike added, his jaw tight. She humiliated you, man. In front of us, in front of everyone. She can't just walk away like it never happened. Their loyalty meant everything, but at the same time, I didn't know what more they could do. The papers were filed. What was done was done. But then Chris leaned in, his voice quiet but charged. We've got footage, Ryan. I blinked. What? From the party. The second she walked in, one of the guys started filming. We've got it all, her face, your reaction, everything. If you want to use it, you can. I sat back stunned. I hadn't even thought of something like that existing. But now that he said it, I realized how much power that video held. Emily hadn't just betrayed me, she'd torn apart our life and made me look like a fool doing it. And now I had the chance to make sure she understood just how deep that cut had gone. What if we took it further? I heard myself say, the anger bubbling back up like it had never left. What if we made sure she didn't just lose her reputation? What if we made her lose everything? Mike raised a brow. What are you thinking? I leaned in, my voice cold, my thoughts sharper than I'd expected. She was willing to risk everything to earn that money. What? Sneak out? Humiliate me? Fine. But what if we exposed it all? Not just the video, names, locations, messages. There's gotta be a trail. If we dig deep enough, we could make sure she never steps into another respectable job again. Chris's eyes lit up, a kind of grim determination flashing across his face. There's always a paper trail. Bank transfers, client lists, messages. If she's been doing this a while, we'll find it. Dave spoke next, calm but deadly serious. We could send it all to her company. Her boss, HR, the board, anyone who needs to know. Make it public. Let everyone see the truth. She'd be fired before the end of the day. The more they talked, the more I felt something shift inside me. Not joy, not revenge, but clarity. She had taken a sledgehammer to our life, to everything we'd built. And now, I had the tools to show her exactly what that destruction felt like. And the video? Mike asked. I stared at the table, then met his eyes. We hold on to it. Let her feel the pressure. Let her know it exists. And if she pushes back, if she lies again or tries to fight dirty, we put it out. Everywhere. The others nodded, quiet and resolute. It was a dark plan. I knew that. But the pain she caused wasn't just personal, it was public. She didn't care what it did to me. And maybe now, it was her turn to watch everything fall apart. The guys all nodded, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I had a grip on something again. Control. Emily had tried to break me, to twist everything we'd built into something unrecognizable. But now I held the power. I could flip the script. And I was going to make sure she felt every ounce of the betrayal she had handed me. I lifted my glass and they followed without hesitation. To justice, I said, my voice steady and sharp. And to making sure she learns what consequences really look like. We clinked bottles and I took that first sip with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I knew this path we were heading down wasn't pretty. But neither was what she'd done. This wasn't revenge just for the sake of it. It was the only way to close a chapter she had torn apart with her lies. I was ready to finish what she started. Over the next few weeks, we worked like men possessed. Chris, Mike, and Dave left no stone unturned. They combed through her phone records, her cloud backups, even social media messages. And what we uncovered was more than I was prepared for. Olivia's side hustle wasn't just some occasional secret. It was organized. It was intentional. And it had gone on longer than I had ever imagined. She wasn't discreet either. There were names, messages, times, and places. We compiled everything. Messages from clients, payment logs, screenshots, even selfies. And when the file was complete, we sent it directly to her company's HR department, along with the unedited footage from that night. It didn't take long. Word came fast, she'd been fired, escorted out of the building like a stranger. People she once called friends didn't even look her in the eye. No goodbyes. No sympathy. Just silence. Cold and heavy. She was left to carry the shame on her own shoulders. But we didn't stop there. Chris made a few quiet calls to his contacts in local media. The story wasn't explicit, but it was suggestive enough to spark attention. It spread like wildfire. Olivia's carefully built image, professional, composed, admired, crumbled overnight. She couldn't step into a coffee shop without whispers following her. Her name became a question mark in every room she entered. Her family, who had always seen her as this beacon of success and independence, pulled away. I heard through mutual friends that they were heartbroken and embarrassed. And just like that, the safety net she'd always relied on was gone. Every door she had once walked through with confidence was now closed, slammed shut behind her. And me? I found something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. This sounds strange, I know. After everything that happened, you'd think I'd be angry or bitter. But I wasn't. Not anymore. Once the divorce was finalized and I walked away without any ties to her, I finally felt like I could breathe again. Mike, Chris, and Dave were more than just my support. They were my lifeline. They pulled me out of the deepest hole I'd ever fallen into. They reminded me that I wasn't broken, just bruised. We started spending more time together, grabbing drinks, grilling on weekends, even talking about trips I never would have thought to take before. They gave me back my smile. I started focusing on myself again. Picked up hobbies I'd long forgotten. Running, sketching, late-night walks just to clear my head. I even dipped my toes into dating again. Nothing serious, just moments that reminded me I could still feel something good. Slowly the bitterness faded. And in its place there was clarity. I realized I'd been clinging to something that hadn't existed for a long time. Even before I found out the truth, I'd been lying to myself, telling myself the distance wasn't real. That the late nights, the silence, the shift in her eyes, it didn't mean anything. But it did. And once I stopped chasing the ghost of what we used to be, I found something better. Myself. I heard bits and pieces about Emily from time to time. She tried to move on, relocate, rebrand herself. But the past has a way of catching up. The lies she thought she could bury had deep roots. Every time she tried to start over, the truth found her. I didn't hate her. I didn't even wish her harm. I just didn't care anymore. The night that really marked my turning point came a few months later. We were at Mike's place, sitting around a backyard fire pit, laughing over cold beers and stories that had nothing to do with pain. Just life. Just friendship. Mike raised his bottle, smiling. To new beginnings. And to finally letting the past stay where it belongs. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my bottle against his. And right there, in that quiet moment surrounded by the people who helped me find my way again, I realized something that stuck with me. I wasn't just healing, I was thriving. I was free. I was whole. And for the first time in years, I was ready to live without looking over my shoulder. Let her chase her ghosts. I was already walking toward something better.